The Monster Guys podcast begins now.
Just sitting here sipping my tea, Michael.
What type of tea do you have?
Right now I am sipping on some Earl Grey and lemonade.
Ah, that sounds familiar.
Yeah, it's a tea that you introduced me to, steamed lemonade and Earl Grey tea, and I absolutely love it. I've been nursing a sore throat for about a week now and lost my voice kind of off and on over the past few days, so that seems to help me soothe the pain.
Yeah, it's a good tingy little concoction.
It is, and I've got a peppermint stick in it right now, so that's helping as well. So if I sound like maybe I have cotton in my throat, it's because I'm overcoming some weather issues the last few days.
Yeah, it has been very rainy here.
It's
dreary.
Freaking cold. Just forget the rain. It's just downright cold.
It's nippy.
I mean, it went from like beach weather to ice, literally overnight.
Yeah, I'm surprised actually that we haven't seen some snow yet.
Yeah, but it's been a good week overall. We had some great family time over the Thanksgiving holiday. Stayed away from those Black Friday crowds. We don't really believe in that kind of stuff so much. We like to not do our shopping on that weekend. And if it's up to me, I'd rather do shopping after Black Friday and support local art and local craftsmen and women, local businesses with my dollars for Christmas shopping.
Here.
So anyway, we are here for another episode of the Monster Guys podcast, and very excited to be with you again. A couple of things that I want to mention before we get into our topic of the evening. We've had our first 5 episodes up now for about a week or so. We are now on iTunes. You can subscribe to the Monster Guys podcast on iTunes, which is very exciting.
Very exciting.
And I would just ask that you take a second to press that subscribe button, give us a listen, and if you enjoy what you hear, give us a good rating and a review, and help us bump up the charts there and help more people find out who we are and things that we're talking about. We're also on Stitcher, which I think ultimately means that we're just about any place that you can find a podcast. Between iTunes and Stitcher, we are most places that you can download a podcast or subscribe to a podcast. So we're out there. The Monster Guys podcast is out there. We're growing. Our numbers are steadily climbing already, and I'm excited about that. As always, you can find out more about us at themonsterguys.com. You can find show notes there for all of our episodes. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram with the handle The Monster Guys. So thanks for being with us. Thanks for hanging out with us. We're looking forward to a lot more really fun stuff here on our podcast. Tonight, we've got a really interesting topic, in my opinion, and it's one that I've had to do a lot more learning about lately. One that actually is one of those topics that I want to continue research on and really get to the depth of some of these stories.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be a bit of an eye-opening podcast tonight for some people, because you say the title of our podcast tonight, and most people probably would pass it off, except for what we're going to go into tonight.
Yeah, so let's just go ahead and call it what it is. Tonight we're talking about trolls. Trolls. It's one of those stereotyped creatures.
Yeah, you get the big dumb cave giant that's beating something upside the head, or Frodo upside the head with a cudgel.
Right. You get this picture of this huge giant, lumbering giant, usually a big club in their hands that's just out for destruction. And whereas that may be truthful about some of these trolls,
it is.
It's not about all of these trolls.
It is not.
I think to get to where we want to go with trolls, though, we first need to go back to some Scandinavian. What the heck is that? Some
like
Scandinavian
temperatures.
It's just that lower freezing temperatures. If anybody caught that episode, what was that, 3 or 4? I don't know. But we've got to go back to some Scandinavian creation mythology and stories to kind of dig up where we want to go with trolls. So in the beginning, there was a great void. Where do we go from there?
Sounds familiar. The Scandinavian creation myth is all over the place, and I think you and I have had to go back and forth a few times to hash out the details. Okay, so disclaimer again, we're going to butcher some words because there are a lot of old Nordic words and a lot of old Swedish words that are really hard to say, so forgive us.
I'm not even sure we need to try to pronounce a lot of those words.
I want to try.
I mean, you can try, but I think at some level we just need to call it what it is in our own English translation or American translation where we're concerned. And that's why I said in the beginning there was a void, there was a silence, there was
the gap.
And we're not talking about the store. But there was a gap in the universe as we know it. Out of that gap came
a realm of fire and a realm of ice.
That sounds epic. I can still get a hold of that. I can wrap my mind around that because that is beautiful. There was a void and then there was fire and ice.
It almost makes you think the world started in fire and ice and it will end in fire and ice.
I want to play some power metal and stand on top of a mountain and raise my fist in the air because out of the void there was fire and there was ice.
Are you going to start playing air guitar?
I probably will.
We can't record that part.
That's okay.
All right.
People have seen me do it live, and I have no shame in it.
I'm sure there's a video somewhere on YouTube of you doing that. But yeah, you have these two realms that pop into existence, a realm of fire and a realm of ice. And
fire and ice.
They start to expand.
Fire and ice expands.
From the realm of ice comes all of the rivers of the world. And also poison. A poison of anger and hatred and evil, basically.
Okay, and that's where this story begins to take its turns, because the rivers coming out of this realm, the poisons one of the rivers.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that, we have a clash.
Yes, which hasn't
clash
come up
of
yet.
Titan. No, we're in the wrong part of the world for that.
Almost a Titan. But we'll get to that in a second. But yeah, so these realms expand, and there's this one river that has poison and hatred and evil and nasty stuff in it. And eventually, they bridge the gap, literally, and the water from
I wonder
the
if
ice
that's
realm.
where that term comes from, bridging the gap. That'd be an interesting word study. I don't know.
We should look that up. I don't think that is. I don't think so.
Okay, so this river is poisoned with all the evil stuff possible, and then
it meets with the fire from the fire realm. Or
dun,
the lava
dun,
from the fire
dun.
realm. And for some strange reason, in the way of wacky creation myths, it creates the first primordial giant, who is known as Ymir.
Okay, so this clash, this expansion, which causes this almost a friction, creates Ymir.
Yes.
The first giant.
The first Jotun.
The Jotun. The first. It's just so epic, this story so far. The fire and the ice and the clashing, and now the giant.
The primordial giant.
It's powerful. It's powerful stuff. We need to write a song about this.
It's epic, and then you get into the weird stuff.
Okay, listen up. Steven and Vix, from our last episode, our Halloween episode, episode 5, we featured their music. I'm calling on you two right now. We need to somehow figure out an epic song that we can write about the fire and the ice clashing and creating the first primordial giant. You guys with me on that? I know you can't hear me right now, but I just want you to just throw your fists in the air and play your air guitar and sing at the top of your lungs right now, wherever you are.
I just have one request. quest, we need somebody to do some headbanging.
I'll be glad to do that. I
Okay.
mean, that's one instrument I can play is headbanging.
Are you ready to delve into the weirder part of this myth, though?
Okay, here we go. We move from fire and ice and expansion, the first giant being created out of this, and then we get weird.
Yes.
Okay, and folks, by the way, stick with us because we're getting to trolls in all of this.
Yeah, you might have to ask yourself, what does this have to do with trolls? You'll see soon enough.
Yes.
But yeah, okay, so here's the weird part. This dude comes to life and he starts to sweat, and from his right and left armpit come the first female and male giant.
Okay, this already gets freaky on me, is that Ymir begins to sweat, and I believe the stories say, I mean, just from his armpit, the sweat from his pits creates
Yeah,
the first male and female giants.
And the frost giants began his race. Now, don't forget as well, his left foot and his right foot got together, they mated, and they gave birth to his six-headed son.
Okay, so okay, we have the sweat from the pits creating the first male and female giants, and now we have his feet joining together, mating feet to create. I tell you, it's getting weird. I can't even figure out how to say foot and feet. His feet mate and create
A six-headed giant.
a six-headed giant. I'm going to get it out.
Yes.
Okay. And then from there,
You have the first three giants, and from there the lineage the family tree gets a little bit jumbled because there's a period of time where you lose track of who's who. These three basically populate what little there is of time and space at that point with the frost giant. So you have a whole bunch of giants that come into existence pretty quickly, and Ymir even himself keeps on having children, by himself, just producing these giants from his body, which is very tiring work, and lo and behold, they need sustenance, right?
of course,
Again, in the Way of Creation myth, there's this primordial cow that shows up in the midst of all of this happening, and they suckle from her. The primordial cow gets tired, and she goes and licks the salty ice from the ice realm. Are you following along?
okay, here we are. Okay, we to recap this. We got fire and ice, epic clashing, creating the first giant. The giant sweats, his armpit sweat, create the first male and female giants, and then his feet get together, and we've got a six-headed giant, and from there he just continues to create
Whole lot of little giant babies.
a whole bunch of little giant babies, which doesn't even make any sense, those two words together. And from there, we get really strange because all those little baby giants need to eat, and so they find this primordial cow that's out there just waiting to nurse these baby giants.
Yep, and then she gets tired.
And then
goes
she
licks
gets
some ice.
tired, and then she goes and finds her own salt lick, which is somewhere in the ice realm. And I'm going to preempt you here because I think what's coming next is she licks this ice, or this salty ice, into the form of
Buri, the
Buri.
first of the gods.
the first of the gods.
Now this is,
Yes, we are still going to get to trolls tonight.
Buri, like I said, is the first of the gods. So right away you have a distinction made between the giants and the gods. Kind of like you have your titans and your Greek gods. Or in our fairies podcast, we have our Fomori and our Tua Dedanen. You have your different classes.
Yeah, and that was episode 1.
Yeah.
That we recorded almost a year ago, and you can
dang.
definitely tell the level of audio quality as we've grown a little bit each time. But
Rock on.
yeah, episode 1 was fairies. We talked about those two classifications.
The kind of ugly, weird, misshapen giants versus the beautiful warriors and magicians, the fairies.
Mm-hmm.
You kind of have a similar thing going on here. The giants, because of the poisoned river, are all thought to be brutish and warlike and belligerent. And over on the other side, you have the gods. And to be honest, the gods aren't all that much better, but, there's a distinction made from the very beginning that they kind of are better. There's only one god at this point. He takes a giantess for a wife and gives birth to a son named Bor, who also takes a giantess for a wife, and they have 3 sons named Vili, Ve, and Odin.
Sound familiar?
Mm-hmm.
Odin, This is where Odin comes into play.
Odin, who becomes the central point of a lot of mythology for the Norse at this point. But so there's already conflict. The gods are taking wives from the giants to have their children.
Giants are not happy about this.
No.
And there's not a greater lesser thing going on here. The giants and the gods here at this point still share almost an equal measure of strength and power and influence, but just kind of in
different ways,
different places.
And I would like to point out, if you're thinking of giants as being just a bunch of, standard bigger humanoids, that's true for the most part, but you have giants with multiple heads, you have giants that are the size of men, you have giants that are the size of mountains, you have giants that are in the shape of wolf spirits. So they're very magical, very mystical beings still. But anyways, back to the gods. Odin, Vili, and Ve decide to wage war on the giants, and they actually go and kill Ymir.
Okay, here we go. We've got some more weirdness coming in here, because now we've got the birth of the gods, and the gods taking the giants for wives, and then we have this whole new race beginning, and then there's war declared between the two.
Mm-hmm. They kind of strike the first blow that we know as far as an actual fight, and they kill Ymir. They kill
Ymir, by the way, the first giant.
Mm-hmm.
That came back when we started talking about all this. The dude that sweated out more giants.
And had a foot child?
Is that a stepchild? Let's oh my gosh. Let's move on.
There we go.
Let's move on quickly.
A stepchild. Okay, anyways.
I'm going to sip my tea on that one.
Are you telling me to heal?
Oh, jeez. Here he goes with his puns again.
All right. Anyways, the gods kill Ymir, and the other frost giants are weakened because of this and kind of beaten back. They kind of run away as Odin, Vili, and Ve manipulate Ymir's body to become different parts of space and time.
Yeah, this is kind of freaky to me. This is where it becomes very non-linear. There's no straight line here at all. I mean, we've already crossed that point, but
yeah, it's a strange point for sure. They basically take his flesh and they form it into a world, into Earth.
Into Earth.
They take his blood and actually squeeze it out of him basically, and it becomes the oceans. And the oceans actually end up drowning a whole lot of the Jotnar or the frost giants, killing them off, except for a couple that survive and repopulate later.
So his flesh becomes the Earth, his blood becomes the waters upon the Earth, and then from there they actually take his head and throw it into the sky.
Well, his head, his skull basically becomes the sky. His brains became the clouds.
Mm-hmm.
His eyelashes they took and created Midgard out of, and Midgard is the world of humans.
Right.
Humans aren't on the scene yet, but that's the world that they'll later populate. They take the eyebrows of Ymir and they build a ridge around what would become Jotunheim or Giant Land, and this is kind of to keep the remaining giants corralled in a place to keep them out of the way so they don't get in their way.
Yeah, they're controlling. It was population control of the giants.
Basically, yes. And yeah, so they fashion his bones into mountains, his hair into trees and plants, and they basically make the world as we know it out of Ymir.
Now, one of the other things that happens during this displacement of Ymir, if you will, into these different worlds is some of the stories, and not all of them, but some of the stories talk about worms that fall to the earth and dig into the earth. I think the primary story here is that those worms bore into the earth and become the dwarves.
Yes.
There are some tellings of this story that say some of those worms actually fell to the earth and became trolls.
Yeah.
Among other creatures. But being that we're talking about trolls, I think it's interesting to note that some of those stories talk about those worms falling to the earth and becoming trolls.
It is interesting to note, but most sources don't seem to go along the same line of thought. I would point out that this mythology is a very oral tradition. The written text and the recorded text that we get a lot of this knowledge from was only written in the 13th century, so a lot of it may have changed.
Yeah, and it's not very well understood. You really have to dig into it to understand it and
Scholars
to follow it.
Still argue over it to this day.
It has a lot. Both of these writings, primary texts that you're talking about,
the prose Edda and the poetic Edda,
right? They have quite a bit of influence from other cultures and other religions. Kind of.
Yes.
on the fringe, tainting a little bit. And so they're being written in the 13th century that we know of. There's bound to be influence there.
Yeah, and that's where actually some scholars argue. There's you know other religions and other cultures have reached this part of the world. So you can tell in the way that they write the language that they've kind of been mingling with cultures at this point. But some scholars believe that this means that they've tried to change their creation myth to fit in with others. Other people believe that it's still completely pure, and the only corruption you see is in the way they use certain words.
Yeah, so here we've got the creation of the world, the oceans, the sky. We even have the creation of various other realms where other races will populate and exist throughout time. What else do we have in this creation myth that we need to bring forth? I think the other part that I'm trying to get at, and this is where it's not a straight line, is the trolls that we want to talk about are pretty much already in existence. They are the giants.
They are. It's really hard to wrap your mind around at first. Trolls, again, a lot of people think of trolls as the big hairy dude under the bridge that tries to eat the 3 billy goats gruff.
My tea is really yummy, by the way.
I'm glad you
this
like it.
Earl Grey and lemonade. A little bit of peppermint in it right now to help the throat.
I can't imagine peppermint in it. I'll have to try it out.
Well, what I've actually done is I've already had the cup originally steeped with the lemonade and the Earl Grey. Now I've gone back and I'm on my second cup, and instead of putting more lemonade in it this time, I put a peppermint stick in it and let it melt through, because peppermint, as many know, will help the throat. But anyway, our trolls are in existence, and it's difficult to wrap your mind around this part of the story.
Yeah, because I don't want to say the word troll as an insult, because it's not, but it's almost used as a negative connotation. And they refer to themselves as trolls sometimes, and it's not in a negative light, but the word troll almost is used as a, just like the way that we would talk about an internet troll these days. It's like, it's that one of those guys.
Mm-hmm.
They're still very magical, very mystical. In fact, they are shapeshifters. They're prophets. One of the places that we get the creation myth from is a poem that basically relates how Odin disguises himself and goes to a troll witch to understand the end of the world.
He's looking for answers to Ragnarok.
Ragnarok, yes. And she goes through the entire creation myth with him, and then goes all the way up into Ragnarok. And this is somebody that is basically a giantess and a troll witch, if you will. And she is powerful and very wise. So it's important to keep in mind that though they are warring races, they are brutal. I'm not brutal, right? They're kind of brutish and thought of as ugly and dumb. These are very elegant beings at times, very powerful beings.
Yeah, I think we just have kind of a stereotyped notion about them throughout modern history, that trolls are these big, ugly, and like you said, brutish beings, and they're not. So before you go any further, though, because this is kind of where we want to venture into our conversation about trolls. Before we do that, before you jump ahead and give too many spoilers, we do have an episode of Tales of the Unknown, and it's a very interesting episode, not talking about a creature per se, but a location. So let's break to Tales of the Unknown right now.
And now it's time for Tales of the Unknown.
There is a physical place in Japan called the Aokigahara. It's called the Suicide Forest. If I'm not mistaken, it's about 14 square miles and sits at the base of Mount Fuji. Just for the record, up front, we're not talking humorous here. We're not talking making light of anything here. This is an actual place with some very serious things taking place, but it is a place of interest and something that I think perhaps has some spiritual tie-in. Not sure. I mean, the verdict's still out, but it's called the Aokigahara, the Suicide Forest. Michael, give us some insights on this particular location.
If you go and read all those creepy places of the world lists on the internet, you've probably seen this place before. It's pretty well known. It is the second most popular place to go to commit suicide in the world, the first being the Golden Gate Bridge. But it's gotten so bad over the years that forestry workers have actually put out signs saying, don't do this, turn back, think of your family and friends, please seek help. And if you go into that forest, you'll find, it's very thick, very dense, and still very natural. It's said to be so dense that it actually blocks out the sounds from outside of the forest. If you go in nowadays, you'll see remnants of nooses on the trees. You'll see tape left behind on the trees for people to find their way. You'll find like dead flowers of people who have been mourning those who have gone into the forest to commit suicide. It's a very tragic place, a place that holds a lot of mystique even to this day.
Well, and I would think so, especially in this country where people still hold to a lot of the old stories. They pay a lot of attention to folklore and its applications in practical everyday life. And so a literal physical location where people are going in high numbers comparatively to commit suicide, I would think that the Japanese people, or at least the culture there, pays pretty good attention to this.
Yeah, very high numbers. We're talking about like 50 to 100 people per year go to commit suicide.
That's a lot of people.
In 2010, I believe it is, there were actually 200 attempted suicides in this forest. And I mean, you're right. Let's not forget that this is at the base of Mount Fuji. So and in Japanese folklore, mountains play a very important role housing, the Tengu and the Oni, very important nature spirits and even deities at some point. So it's a very mystical place to start out with. And because of all the suicides in the last few decades, and if the old stories are true, reaching back centuries, this is a place to die, period. Nowadays, when hikers go in, people go in, they see apparitions, they see faces in the trees, they see things moving around on their own, almost like a poltergeist type situation.
Well, going back to that comment about centuries ago, because the recorded suicides taking place only goes back maybe 100 years, but you were telling me early about centuries ago, this was a place where people would take their elderly or their sick, their infirm, the people who were not expected to recover, and they would take them there to die.
Yes. So, I mean, like I said, this place has at least a folkloric history, if not, everything being completely recorded.
Sounds like it's got a very real history of death.
Yes, it does. And of demonic activity. Again, this particular forest has a lot of spiritual activity dating back for a very long time.
Well, and I think that was my next question and thought process was, what is the draw to this particular 14 square miles of land for people to come and to go and take their lives? What is there a spiritual draw that people believe exists?
There are a lot of different theories. The one that makes sense the most to some people is that it's a socio-economic thing. Japan has very high standards, and some people believe that if somebody's not able to hold to that standard, sometimes they buckle and they go to this forest. They choose it just because it's so often chosen already.
Well, if I'm not mistaken, there's already a high suicide rate in that country because of the standard of expectation of living. So I think comparatively, I may be mistaken, but I believe that there is a high suicide rate in that country already. But then there's a special location that seems to be reserved for suicide.
Right. Again, going back to the spiritual side of it, this place is called a bunch of different names, but one of the names for it is the Purgatory of Yurei, or the Purgatory of Ghosts. And it said that if you get lost there, which is very easy, there are iron deposits on the ground, there are lost or like collapsed tunnels, there are a lot of caves that are undocumented. So it's very easy to get lost in here. But it said that once you go in, because of all of the angry spirits, the people who have not moved on from this life, they want to keep you there and have you join them.
So there seems to be a spiritual draw, if for no other reason, from the standpoint of folklore, of history. So there seems to be somewhat of a draw to that location for suicide activity. But there's also a lot of people that just visit it, to visit loved ones who have died there, or to go for a hike or a walk. And you even told me at one point about the ranger stations in that forest, and I guess they have a special room?
Oh yeah, the forestry workers, people who work in that forest, in their station, they do have a special room where when they find a body, they'll take this body to a specially prepared room for the purpose of that spirit being able to move on from this life. There's an idea that if a spirit is lonely when they die, that they won't be able to move on from this earth, and they'll stick around to haunt the place.
So they're taking bodies to that room so that the spirit won't be lonely.
Right, so the spirit won't be lonely.
And they'll be comforted and have a place where they can easily move on from this life.
Move on to the next one.
That's very interesting. There's a lot of places in our world that is just a haven for strange activity. This is one of those places, and pretty high on the list in my opinion. And I think, if nothing else, the reality that there is a lot of death, real death, not stories, not folklore, but real people taking their lives in this forest. People at the end of their rope feeling like there's no other option. And for whatever reason, whether it's history or folklore or stories, superstition or whatever else, people are coming to this location, which, of course, is going to be thick with death, and the spiritual activities surrounding death. So
yeah, and it's considered a very dangerous place to go into.
So anyway, it is an interesting place. It holds a lot of weight, both in that culture and I believe in our world. Anytime you're talking about someone's life being taken either by their own hand or someone else's, in my opinion, it's very serious and not to be taken lightly. So we don't bring this subject up to take it lightly or to joke about it. It just is one of those places that is strange, and a lot of things taking place there that is interesting to research and learn more about. I will say this on the flip side of this conversation, that if you're listening to this podcast and you're going through something, or you feel like you're at the end of your rope, or you don't really see any options, there are options. Ask somebody for some help. Call a suicide hotline. Get in touch with a friend. Talk to somebody that you trust. Let's try to find a way. You're worth it. You're worth being here. Even if it's just me and I may not know you, I just want you to know that you're worth being on this earth. And I hope that if you're listening to this and you're facing difficult times right now, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, even physically, there's hope, and I hope you find some help. And if there's something we can do, even if it's point you to the right people, contact us through our website, and we'll see how we can help. If nothing else, just know that you're loved and you mean something significant here. That being said, what is interesting to me as well, you and I were talking about this the other day in some of our research. Then we went to a movie. We went to see a movie. Walking through that movie theater, we see a poster for a movie that's coming out real soon about this forest.
Yeah, it's called The Forest, and on the movie poster, it shows, silhouettes of like hanging nooses and such. And it caught my eye. I did a double take, and I walked over and looked at it and asked you, is that really the same forest that, I think it is?
Yeah, I think we were both surprised when we realized that it was about the Aokigahara, that somebody would be making a movie about this.
Yeah, because even though it's very popular to see around the internet, and it's pretty well known, I still feel like it's a touchy subject. And then watching the trailer, I don't want to say it looks like it's going to be a scare fest. I'm sure they will. I hope that they'll treat it with reverence, but it looks like they are using a lot of ghosts and special effects and stuff, so it's interesting.
Yeah, I think so. It's Hollywood. They're going to play that up, and I think they are going to play on the angle of jump scares and scare tactics and everything else to make it a horror film. I do hope they respect the reality of what takes place there, and nothing is made light of in that. I don't think they will. I don't know. The verdict's still out on that one, so I'm sure we'll see it. Maybe we'll talk about it in a future podcast. But it's popular enough that Hollywood is taking the story up and taking a run with it. It is an interesting location. It's a very popular location. Again, it's just saturated with a very sad activity taking place in that country. At the end of this segment, please, if you feel like there are no other options, and you feel like you're at the end, there's more. There's hope. Please get in touch with somebody. Give it another chance. Hang in there. I appreciate you. I know Michael does. And it's a very serious subject, and we don't want to miss an opportunity to encourage you to find the hope that you need to keep taking that next step. All of that being said, Tales of the Unknown, I think that's a wrap for the day, and we'll continue on with our regularly scheduled episode.
Heck yeah.
Back to trolls. You mentioned how Odin went to visit a troll witch who, when he was seeking answers about Ragnarok, and how she was a very wise and elegant creature. And we wanted to talk a little bit about how trolls are stereotyped into this big, ugly mountain giant, really, that's just lumbering around with a club on their shoulder and bent on destruction. And yes, trolls trolls, a lot of them are destructive creatures. A lot of them are big and some of them very dumb, but not all of them. There's a great variety of trolls.
There really are. I think I made a statement a while ago that trolls are kind of like, they are to Scandinavia what fairies are to the Celts. And I think you kind of looked at me cross-eyed for a second.
I did when we were talking about this in the beginning of our conversation about all of this, and I had to take a deep breath and breathe in and breathe out and wonder where you were going with that. But it really made a lot of sense the more we talked about it. There's still a lot, especially when we go back to that Scandinavian creation story, there's still a lot that I want to wrap my mind around that I don't feel I have a grasp on. But, you know, in the depths of the story and a lot of the writings and the poetry about it, going back to trolls, the very same thing for them. There's such a variety and such an elegance to a great deal of these creatures. And just off the top of my head, I think two of the most popular types of trolls that people think about would be woodland trolls and mountain trolls.
Yes, you know, from the Hall of the Mountain King, where you've got that musical piece and the hero gets lost in the maze of tunnels underneath the mountain, to, you know, creatures like in Troll Hunter, which is a really good movie. If you guys have not seen it, I highly recommend it.
Yeah, we actually watched Troll Hunter again last night in preparation for this recording. Not so much as historical reference, but just a cultural reference, and it's a really good movie.
It's a darn good movie.
It's a movie. I believe it's a Norwegian film.
Yeah, and it's not often that I can get you to watch a movie like 3 and 4 times.
You know, I'm the type of guy, I watch a movie once and I'm done with it. Regardless of how. There are very few movies that I'll watch time and again. I think we've watched this movie 3 or 4 times now.
This was time number 4, yeah.
This is it's a really well-written movie. It's a well-filmed movie. I think you made that comment last night that it was just well-written and well-filmed. I recommend it. It's not historically accurate when it comes to the story of trolls all the way through it, but it does have some really good commentary about trolls.
It does, and it plays on the old legends pretty interestingly. It takes its own twist on the old legends and puts a spin on them that is more scientific, but still plays with some of the trolls can smell the blood of a Christian man, and
right.
they hate church
some
bells.
of those mystical and spiritual themes.
Definitely.
So this movie is called Troll Hunter. It's a Norwegian film, a foreign film. Look it up. I believe it's on Netflix right now, and
it is.
I think you can get it most other places at this point. But it's a great film, a really good entertainment.
And the favorite quote from the movie is, of course, "Troll."
Okay, there you go. So,
but anyways, all right. So let's break down.
I think we mentioned that movie because they specifically deal in the movie with woodland trolls and mountain trolls, but that's really just the beginning.
I was gonna say, let's break it down from the top. You have those two, but to go a farther stretch in some of the areas or the regions, I should say, that were settled by Vikings in Celtic islands.
I'm really enjoying my tea, by the way. I'm sipping this tea, and I just feel you need to know that I'm enjoying it.
I'm glad you like the tea.
It's probably what's keeping me talking at this point, but
in some of those Celtic regions that
yummy.
That were settled
really
by the Vikings.
Really yummy.
Trolls were a thing.
Trolls probably liked tea.
They were called trows. They like Christmas porridge, but we'll get to that again. Keep the spoilers at bay.
So woodland trolls to mountain trolls to
trows, which lived in burial mounds like fairies, and lived
like the sluagh.
Yeah, and they also lived in the shore, literally in the waves sometimes, or along the shoreline. But you have your nature spirit trolls,
which is where you have a lot of cautionary tales and really powerful parables and stories that are told among these people throughout the ages. When you think about a troll living in the waves or along the shore, there's some really good storytelling right there.
Yeah, and pretty frightening to think about walking along the beach and getting picked up by a troll too.
Well, like I said, really cool storytelling.
Then you have trolls that live underground in these big communities all to themselves, and from them you have an interesting type of troll called the Hulder, or the Hulder woman.
The Hulder woman.
Mm-hmm. Now this is a troll that is actually described as a beautiful woman, but she has a troll tail. She will go up to the surface and find a young man or a farm boy that's attractive, and she will charm him and make him love her. Now, there are 2 ways the story can go. She can either kind of kidnap him, take him down to the Holder realm, which may or may not sound like the fairy realm if you heard our first podcast.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Or if he manages to keep her, on the surface, he might marry her in a church. And if this happens, her tail will fall off and she'll become a good human wife. And the children that they have together actually are able to see things and hear things that other children are not able to see and hear.
They have special abilities and supernatural powers almost.
Yeah. And
I made a mention about when we talked about the Holder trolls that we watched another movie that was kind of similar to that story, and that movie was another foreign film called Thale,
Yes.
Thale. If you want to look it up, it's an interesting film as well. The primary character or creature in that film had a tail that would fall off.
It was a beautiful girl that was kind of locked away in a cellar, if I remember correct, and she had a tail, and they were trying to figure out who she was, why she was in the cellar. But it was kind of the same, concept. Now, I feel like we would be amiss to go through all of these and not point out the mischievous Tomte or the Nisse.
Right, and you like those little guys quite a bit.
Well, I do. They match up with some other creatures from other countries.
Well, let's not get to that yet. Tell us about
their house spirits, basically.
Okay.
They're ancestral
but they're trolls.
They are like domesticated trolls.
That's weird. I want my own troll.
No, they're not pets by any means.
Okay, never mind. I don't want. Never mind.
They're described as being like wizened old men, but the size of children. So it almost sounds like a gnome or a dwarf, right? And they do wear a red cap as well. But these guys will help take care of your kitchens. They'll help take care of your farmland animals. They'll help take care of the land itself. And they don't ask for much. They just want to be respected, treated with kindness, and during Christmas time, they want to be given Yule Grot, or
Yule
Christmas porridge.
Yes.
Specifically with butter.
So many similarities to some other creatures, especially in the fairy realm. But never mind, we'll keep going.
Right, so these guys are mischievous, just like the rest of trolls. But yeah, these are just some of the different types you have. They're not
And these are the Tomtar and the Nisar.
The plural is Tomtar and the plural of Nisse is Nisar.
So we've got the Tomtar and the Nisar trolls, which are kind of domesticated house spirits. We have the Holder trolls, or the Holder women, which are beautiful women that live underground.
Witches, yeah.
Yeah, that have tails that if they are married in the human realm, those tails fall off. And then we also have ogres.
Well, I mean, they're similar to ogres.
I'm sorry, we also have shapeshifters.
Yeah, trolls are said to be able to prophesy and said to be able to shapeshift, which brings to mind ogres, the French mountain giant creature, whatever you want to call it, that eats people.
Which this is very interesting to me, because trolls, again, the stereotype, are these big lumbering giants, but yet here we have, to be a shapeshifter, that's a very magical being.
Mm-hmm. And to be a seer or a prophet.
And to be able to prophesy, I mean, there's a great intelligence, or at least a great connection.
Well, and like we were talking about earlier, one of motherly troll witches back in the creation myth was known as a great prophetess herself, and was kind of like the mother of that whole realm of things. And a lot of troll women were followers of her, so that naturally kind of carried on throughout the ages. But all that to say, trolls are not just these giants carrying around big, trees to bop people over the head with. There are lots of different creatures wrapped up into one umbrella.
Yet we still do have those big ones that run around and destroy and terrorize.
Definitely.
So going back to the Tomtar and the Nisar, we can reference those culturally in other regions as brownies.
Brownies or Oris from Ireland and Scotland.
The Domovoy
from Russia.
Okay, the Holder trolls, we can go back and kind of compare them to mermaids and selkies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because you have the similar idea of men catching mermaids and making them women on land, or doing the same thing with selkies.
And then we've already talked about the shapeshifters and the seers, like the ogres of France. So even though many other cultures and many other countries may not have trolls per se, they do have similar creatures. They do have similar mythologies to the trolls of the Scandinavian mythology.
Yeah, they're very similar archetypes. And I think you used a good word. Trolls are kind of landlocked.
Yeah.
You don't see a troll in Ireland.
Right.
But you do see, some similarities that a troll might share with a Cluracan or a brownie or a Domovoid.
And I had mentioned that trolls are kind of landlocked to that Scandinavian geography, but you're not, again, like you said, you're not going to see them in other countries, but we do have some similarities, and I think that's very interesting. I wonder if there's some influence crossing over there, if there's some cross-pollination throughout the years.
Probably, because again, the Vikings would row across the waters and visit these other cultures, and they would bring back pieces and bits of other places, and they would bring their own pieces and bits to other places as well. So there is a lot of story swapping that I'm sure did happen. You had asked a good in-depth question of why trolls?
Yeah.
Why do they persist?
Well, I'm always interested in the human psychology of monsters, of creatures, of mythologies. Why do we have these stories? What does it mean to us, and what do we take from these stories? What do we learn from these stories? So I think it's more difficult with trolls to find this, at least historically, but you had brought up some references to some modern references to trolls and kind of their lessons learned.
Yeah, and I think we should throw out the obvious answers first. A lot of people would describe parts of the landscape as remnants of trolls who they had turned to stone in the sunlight. So, you have your geographical explanations, your sounds in the woods, your people going missing. But
well, and I'd even mention, coming from that part of the world where, let's say you might want to go hiking, you might want to scale a mountain. There's some caution there that you might not want to go wake up that troll because avalanche, rocks falling to your death, all kinds of things,
right.
and it could be blamed on the troll.
Yeah, the mountain trolls actually would stomp the land and cause earthquakes and avalanches and all sorts of disasters because they, again, were belligerent creatures. They like to cause their form of mischief, which was sometimes deadly to us.
Or like the big, giant troll at the end of Troll Hunter. I'm not going to say what happened to that one, but that was quite a destructive beast there at the end. And when you see what caused his rampage, I mean, it makes a lot of sense. It's kind of funny, but it makes sense. That was a terrifying beast there at the end.
Yeah, and I liked the term that the Troll Hunter gives him. He calls him a Jotun, frost giant, and it's very fitting. And if you go watch the movie, you'll find out why. But yeah, I got a tickle out of it. But yeah, back to some of those more modern explanations. I guess within the last 100 to a couple hundred years, trolls have taken on a group of characteristics that are negative. Or maybe I should say it this way: they already have that group of characteristics that are negative, but we use them in children's stories to explain certain characteristics like covetousness or fear or
greed,
bigotry or greed, or any of these things,
anger, all that stuff.
Even little things like snooping around in other people's business. And this actually kind of makes sense when you think of the Yule Lads, which is a topic we've covered on our website, and I'm sure we'll get to it on podcast at some point.
Yeah, we wrote an article about them last year in brief, and I think we'll probably do a podcast.
Yeah. But the Yule Lads are like Christmas trolls, and they have characteristics that are, they're named after their characteristics, like door slammer or, pot licker. And I think the same ideas form trolls in children's stories today. The troll under the bridge for the three billy goats gruff. The troll under the bridge for the three billy goats is the great example of, a troll that doesn't want anybody to cross its land. It's covetous. It's very territorial, and it constantly wants more.
And not to overdo the reference for the movie Troll Hunter, but there's an interesting scene in that movie that references that old tale. It's the three billy goats gruff.
Hilarious, and at the same time, it's pretty dark.
It's very dark. It is a little bit fun. I think the reference to the story to me is what was humorous, but the actual depiction of what took place in that scene was very dark.
Yeah, it's very dark. It's
very disturbing for a lot of people.
Yeah, it takes you back to the down-to-earth reality of what a troll is, according to that movie.
My gosh, it sounds like maybe we're getting paid. By the way, we're not getting paid to reference this movie at all.
It's just a really good movie.
We just really enjoyed it, and it just so happens to correlate to our topic tonight, and we watched again this week just in preparation for this show. But anyway, we're not getting paid for this. We're not trying to push this, but it's just it's just a fun piece of entertainment.
It is. So you have your trolls in children's stories, modern children's stories, I should say, and they act as kind of cautionary tales. Don't grow up and be like this troll-like person. A lot of language actually in that part of the world is still used today. If one dude is being a jerk, let's say he's called a troll-like person, or he has troll-like characteristics, and you don't want to be a troll. You don't want to be an internet troll, and that's kind of carried over to our pop culture at this point.
Right. Please don't be an internet troll.
Yeah, it's kind of, we won't go there.
So anyway, I mean, there's some really interesting conversation that, is to be had about trolls. I mean, going all the way back to that Scandinavian creation myth and where the giants come from in that story, kind of how they're separated into their own realm, and the war between the giants and the gods, then just moving into cultural references of trolls in that Scandinavian culture. And then, seeing some of the correlation between them and the stories of other fairies and other creatures from other countries. Trolls aren't just a single-minded, dumb beast that is running around the woods and chopping trees down. Even though there are some of those, trolls are very interesting and, like you said earlier, very elegant and powerful and sometimes wise group of creatures.
Yeah, when you have Odin, the All-Father, all-seeing god of Norse mythology, going to a troll for knowledge, that should tell you something.
Yeah, I think it does.
I'm still stuck on something, though.
What's that?
So you have a red-headed stepchild, right?
You want some tea?
No. What?
You want some tea?
No.
Will that help you get unstuck?
No.
I have a nice cup of tea.
No,
I'm going to sip the tea right now into the microphone.
I'm stuck in a...
That was really yummy. Would you like some?
I'm wondering how you got the sound. It sounds like it's in 3D.
Because I drink tea in 3D. You just need to remember that, okay? DC McGannon drinks tea in 3D. What's up with that? Trolls, ladies and gentlemen.
Okay. Now it's my turn to say.
So what are you stuck on?
Well, okay, so I have a thought. You have the term red-headed stepchild, right? And it's
okay.
Like a difficult person.
Are you going back to this six-headed foot monster that was created from Ymir?
If you have a red-headed stepchild, what is a six-headed stepchild?
What?
I don't know. That's what I'm asking.
Oh, I thought you were coming up with a joke here or something.
Oh, that's the joke. I mean, he's a stepchild because, he's born of feet. But I wonder, you've got your female giant, your male giant. Does this guy cause problems? Is he the real reason that Jotnar and Frost giants had issues?
I see where you're going with this. The stepchild. Okay, now I'm saying it. The giant that was created from the feet.
The six-headed stepchild.
You're saying could be possibly could have been the catalyst for the difficulties between those races.
It makes sense. It does.
Well, yeah, but I think it's a stretch. I don't know. We'd have to look into that. But I think you're just looking for more material to tell more jokes and puns about.
Maybe. It wouldn't be too far of a step.
Listen, folks, we hope you've had a wonderful holiday season so far. We've been celebrating since Halloween, and we'll just continue on through the end of the year.
We still have our Halloween tree up.
We do. We have our Halloween tree up still. But we hope you have some great family time. Be safe, especially with all this weather stuff going on in the world. And look us up on iTunes. Just subscribe, share it, give us some good ratings if you think we're worth it. You can find us iTunes, Stitcher, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, The Monster Guys, or The Monster Guys Podcast. It's been great talking to you tonight.
Down, down, the sun is going down. Let's go into the town and burn it to the ground today. Whoa, tonight, alright. Down, down, the sun is going down. Let's go into the town, burn it to the ground tonight. Whoa, tonight, alright. The feeling of remorse is slightly overwhelming as I'm bashing in your door. Let's go into the town.